Welcome to this installation of Benchmark's webinar series. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to be stretching our viewpoint out a bit and looking at transactions a little more broadly. Our webinars tend to focus on kind of the mechanics of the deals and net working capital and EBITDA and things like that. But in my 20 plus years of doing this, I've never had a client who came to me and said, I want to sell my business because I think it'll be fun to go through the process, or I want to learn the process, and I learn by doing. So let's sell a business. People sell their businesses for two reasons. One reason is they want their time back, and the other reason is they're looking for the money. And I think when it comes to that goal of getting the time back, I don't think you need a webinar to tell you what to do with getting your time back. But something that I see our clients have a lot of issues with, and I think this webinar will help with, is that money aspect, that those broader issues about what is this transaction going to mean to me? What is my life going to be like afterwards? Will my family be taken care of? Will I be able to accomplish my goals? I see a lot of hesitancy and concern from our business owner clients about those types of questions. So we decided to add this into the series. And as Benchmark International is not a wealth manager, we have brought in one of our esteemed colleagues from BNY Mellon Wealth Management, Chris Swain. We invited him to attend. He graciously accepted. So just a quick background. Chris is a senior director at BNY Mellon Wealth Management. He has over 20 years of experience serving business owners and their families to help them create a financially secure future. He works in conjunction with their other M&A advisors, such as Benchmark, their tax planning, accounting people, their legal team, to help them with some of their concerns, and in particular, the three biggest concerns are that he often sees these business owners a bit overwhelmed with the number of sale options they have and trying to weigh the different decisions of how to proceed. He sees that they're confused about the tax aspects of the transaction, which can get very, very complicated. And then most importantly, they're worried if they'll have enough. If they accept this transaction and go through, will they have enough? And we'll talk a little bit about what enough means over the course of the next hour. He's an active member of the M&A community and is a co-leader of the largest and most successful chapter of the Alliance of Mergers and Acquisitions Advisors. He's written many articles for business owners, which I read constantly, and he's a frequent public speaker. And he's proud to say that, as is the theory with our webinar series, the purpose of his speaking and writing is always to educate the reader or viewer. So that's what we're going to try to do today. So, Chris, just so we have a level set to start off, could you give the audience kind of a definition of wealth management?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and thank you so much for that very generous introduction. There's a lot of misconception in the world of investments today, and I like to say that in a wealth management complex, in a relationship with a wealth manager, it goes beyond investments. It really gets to the core of why are we going through this transition? What is the point? And helping families to understand and quantify what are those objectives. And it really takes a look at both sides of the balance sheet, from both the assets and liabilities side. It takes into consideration what type of objectives they hope to accomplish through their lifestyle. What is the type of income that they need to provide themselves as a result of the cash flow that they've earned over many, many years of owning a business? How can I prepare my family for this transition? What about charity? What are those types of things that I need to be thinking about? What kind of direction, next chapter does that look like? And that's some of the things, Clinton, to be perfectly honest with you, is a lot of the challenges that I encounter with business owners is they haven't given those things proper credit. They haven't given them the time. They focus so much on the business and making it successful. And some of the things that fall through the cracks are those personal things, those goals, those objectives. What do we need this next chapter to look like? So a wealth manager, a qualified wealth manager, someone who has experience working with business owners, someone who has a legacy of excellence in putting their clients first, but more importantly than anything else, is someone who looks at investments as merely the vehicle that helps you to achieve your objectives. But the proper plan has to be established first. Okay. And that's really kind of what differentiates sort of a wealth manager from maybe just an investment advisor that's providing an idea or a particular product.
Okay, so you have an investment advisor, wealth manager. I think even within the world of wealth managers, there are probably a number of different options that someone with money could go to look at.
Absolutely.
So do you want to kind of break down the field of wealth management, and then maybe so the audience understands where you're coming from, a little bit about BNY Mellon Wealth Management's, like where do you fit in that range of different types of wealth managers?
Yeah. So the broader BNY Mellon organization is one of the largest custodians and corporate trustees in the world. And so taking that global access to information, financial markets, we offer a unique relationship to our clients who are high net worth and ultra high net worth in a boutique environment. So we really want to create an environment for them, one that's comfortable, and that they are around other folks like themselves who have either achieved a certain level of financial success through a business sale or potentially through a real estate transaction, but also have accumulated the level of sophistication that requires a high-powered team of tax and legal professionals to be able to help them solve a lot of these concerns and issues. And so that's what we offer our clients, is that unique high-touch experience, high levels of satisfaction, but really kind of getting to the core of what do they want to accomplish.
Okay.
What type of tolerance do they have for risk? And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but a lot of business owners have a tendency to assume the wealth that they have created through the risk of that large asset on their balance sheet. Now they're going to create a pile of money, and how do we do this? And a lot of clients are very concerned and fearful about potentially losing that. So we help to kind of quantify what their objectives are, create those plans to help them get to the next level. And we do that in an environment that is comfortable, it's confidential, but really bringing again and underscoring the experience of knowing how to work with business owners and really understanding their unique concerns.
Great. Okay, so that's a bit of an introduction on my partner here today. To roll through the kind of the other mechanics at the beginning, as always, there's a little orange arrow in the upper right-hand side of your screen. If you click on that orange arrow, you'll see a couple things there that are important. One is a series of PDFs. If you'd like more information about Chris, his bio is there. He's also provided some wealth management literature from BNY Mellon Wealth Management. In addition, we have the newest copy of Benchmark International's magazine, The Mark. Just hit the digital press today. It's at the printer. The hard copies should be coming out soon, so you can find that there to get the latest news on the world of M&A. And then down below that, you'll see a little screen where you can send in your questions. So we will have time at the end, as always, to answer your questions. Kyle is here today manning the questions. He'll answer some of those in real time, so go ahead and send them when you have them. If it's a good question for the whole audience, he'll save it till the end and ask us. So we encourage you to send those questions along. As we started with our last webinar, I believe, we have a questionnaire at the end. So we encourage you to take a look at that when we're done speaking and help us out with that. We did read all of them last time. We got great feedback. The one criticism we had was sound quality. So you can see the brand new microphone. So that proves that we do read surveys and take them to heart. So please do fill in the survey when you're done. With that, getting the introductions and everything out of the way, let's jump into the meat of the subject. Make sure I start in the right place here. Yeah, so the biggest misconception I see when I'm dealing with business owners that are thinking about selling or in the process of selling, they come and they say, you know, am I selling my business for enough money to accomplish these goals that you talked about? And I mean, I know that's a misconception because these business owners for years, they've been making money. Yes, they're all of our clients, or 95% of our clients are working 60 hours or more in the business.
Absolutely.
And they're making their money. They're earning their money, but their money is also making money for them because they're taking profits or potential profits and constantly reinvesting them in the business. That's how they got so successful. It's one of the ways they got so successful to have a good exit. Their money has been working for them, but they kind of tend to think that once they sell, their money's going to stop working for them. And I know, not being a wealth manager, I know enough to know that no, their money is still going to make money for them. It's going to be in a different way.
Right.
So these business owners, as I'm sure you know, maybe a little self-realization for our audience, have gotten wealthy, have done well for themselves and their family by reinvesting their money in a single asset, or at least a large dominant portion of their money in a single asset many times. And that's literally having all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
And so when you get older, you need to diversify a little bit more is the conventional wisdom. And so part of transitioning out of your business is exactly that, taking your eggs out of the one basket and spreading them around through the help of a wealth manager. But so like that's about as good as an explanation as I, as an amateur, can give on it. So maybe you could give a little better description to the audience about this concept of your money's always been making money for you. Now it's going to keep making money for you. So the deal has to set you up not to cover all of your goals, but to be in a position to allow that money and the reinvestment of that money to cover your goals. How do you really, what's the professional way to say what I just wobbled my way through?
Whew, wow. That's a great question. And I would say that's generally speaking how we start off a relationship with a business owner. I'm a big fan of data, and the most recent Exit Planning Institute statistic that just came out overwhelmingly tells us that business owners are thinking about a transition. They think about what does this look like? But when you ask them directly, what is your formal transition plan? 86% of them don't have one. So what is it that is missing? What is the missing element there? And the missing element, in my opinion, is relevancy. You know, a dollar amount without relevancy means nothing. So a lot of the work that we do on the onset with business owners is talking through what is it that you hope to accomplish as a result of this sale. Again, we want to push investments and those individual products and solutions into the future because we don't really know what we're going to deal with. What is that number that you have in mind? And for a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs, as you mentioned earlier, you have that single largest asset on your balance sheet that's provided you with cash flow and security, and you get to wake up in the morning and go to that office and work and make it successful and grow it. When the time comes to think about monetizing that value, there really has been little attention, in my experience, for business owners to focus on me. It's been on the business. For so long, it has been making the business successful. And what do I need to do to build the business so that it can sustain my lifestyle? And when there's a transition discussion happening, what I love to do is bring a client into an office, shut the doors, and have a personal one-on-one conversation like we're doing and saying, what is it that you want to do? What are your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your aspirations? And in almost every single instance, the business owner sits back, takes a deep breath, and says, I've never really thought about that.
Wow.
So we try to quantify what they want to accomplish, because if I'm going to sell my business for 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, whatever the number is, but yet I don't know what I need or my family needs, that transaction is irrelevant. And that's another thing that we see, is that families that don't have a formal plan and haven't communicated that plan, once they go through an exit on the other side, the question becomes, is that it? Because they haven't addressed the personal side that was so important in the past that now they have to race around and try to solve for. So we want our families, much like Benchmark does for your business owners, is you want them to understand and realize the potential that this money could give them and the types of solutions and types of families, whether it's your own family or a charitable, what could we provide to the future? What difference can I make now that I have begun this transition? And those are really deep conversations that sometimes take weeks to get an answer from.
So it sounds like you may have kind of already answered this question, but so a business owner that's transitioning or looking to transition, when is the proper time to start a relationship with a wealth manager?
And this is a big one. A lot of business owners are under the impression that, you know, I don't have the level of wealth to go speak to somebody, maybe at an investment firm, that, geez, I'm not there yet. And my answer is 2 to 3 years before the transition. In fact, if you're thinking between now and the next 3 to 5 years that there's going to be an exit to a business, you need to engage someone who has the knowledge and expertise and experience of working with privately held business owners to be able to work through some of these situations. Because if you don't, which again is also common, then it's a bit of a race to get caught up. And sometimes the longer you wait, the more difficult it is to do proper planning from both a tax perspective and estate planning perspective. You really need to be able to have those conversations early and often, even when it feels like you don't need to have them yet. You know, we're still working on the business. I've got this 5-year plan. I want to hit a number. That's great, but let's have that conversation so that we can take care of the work beforehand and build the foundation so that when you get to that point, there's a transition of relief, the freedom, the security that comes with properly planning to build this business to go through an exit.
Okay, so I use the word relationship and you use the term engage. And I think I know the answer to this question, but when a business owner goes to do this, prior to even starting a transaction, should they be paying for this, or when should they expect to pay any amount of money? I don't want to get into the details of the fees, but I just want to make sure I think that the audience knows the right answer on this.
That's an excellent question. And again, I think this is one of the primary reasons that business owners typically don't engage at this stage, because they think it's going to be expensive or I'm going to be sold a product or whatever the case may be. But the way that our business works and the way that I work as an advisor to these families is really to get that understanding beforehand and build the planning out. And the best part about it is there's no cost for those services, because when you're having a conversation with someone and you're helping them to derive solutions that they're looking for or trying to get to a number or whatever the case may be, our process works very much like we want to be able to provide that experience of what it's like to be a client before you do, so that you can make the decision early on, as opposed to the other way around. I've sold the business, I'm now shopping a wealth manager, and a lot of times the conversation comes around fees and performance. But the value to the family is what I've discovered in my 20 years in this business, and research has told us, is that the value really happens before the transaction. The satisfaction post-transaction has much more relevancy in the planning you can do before, versus just trying to pick the best money manager or the best investments to help you get to the next level. It's really that advice and that counsel beforehand. And you know this firsthand at Benchmark. The advice and counsel and the teams that you bring to every business owner that you work with to bring about that consultative discussion around what do they want to hope and accomplish? What types of buyers are you most interested in bringing to the table to help them sell?
Yeah, same process.
Planning.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So our clients tend to be owner operators, and I think you've worked with, primarily owner operators also. And so these are men and women who have had control, and they've had exactly whatever kind of control they want. They've had that control. Very few have taken outside, equity money prior to coming to us or perhaps to you. And some of them have some bank loans where there's a little bit of control that you cede to the bank, but not too much. But a lot of our clients actually run their business pretty much debt free as well. No board of directors telling them what to do. They're the sole shareholder, or they and their spouse are the sole shareholders, or it's 3 or 4 people that are close associates, and they're the boss. They have the thing on the desk that says the buck stops here. And so they're very comfortable reinvesting their money because they make every decision that they want to make. And I think when you move to the world of, post being the boss, there's a concern, and I even see it, as these business owners come into the transaction, concern of ceding control. And so I think it's probably worth kind of addressing, as I see that as one of the big concerns that the audience has, and with this post-transaction life. How do you get them comfortable with that? It's not giving up control, really. It's a different type of control. Maybe it's limiting it a little bit, but talk about that control aspect.
So that is one of the biggest areas that we address with every business owner that we work with. In fact, my father was a business owner. He owned a construction company for many, many years. So I got a chance to see firsthand what it's like to live with someone who generally ran the business within 100% control. And there's always variables, cost of materials, labor, that sort of thing, economic cycles. But at the end of the day, they turn the lights on and unlock the door. They're running the show. So one of the things that we do in the work with the families that we serve is we really take the family, the business owner, and we talk a lot about family office CEO. So they're really not losing the title. They're really not losing control. They're actually remaining at the head of the household, whether it be a husband and wife business, it could be multiple family members, whatever the case may be, but we really create that experience that they were familiar with when they were running the business, which is I'm in control, I'm the present CEO, I make these decisions. And we have now elevated them to family office CEO. And we create for them an experience that's similar to them. So much like they create a balance sheet for their business, assets, liabilities, cash flow statements, pro formas, all of those things that they love to do when they log in and Monday morning, they press the button and they see how successful the business is or what areas do we need to pay attention to. We create dashboards for our families so that they have that similar experience. We create personal balance sheets for them so they can understand the family structure and what does that look like from an assets and liabilities standpoint. We create cash flow pro formas, things that they're used to seeing from their CFO or tax advisor. So we really want that transition to be similar and comfortable, as opposed to now I'm doing something completely different and I don't understand what this looks like. Because when you transition from entrepreneur to investor, sometimes that transition in the business and the families I've worked with can be 3 to 6 months. Sometimes it can be years to be able to make that full transition to where they are now in that seat of investor as opposed to that entrepreneur. But I'll be perfectly honest with you, every single client I've worked with has always maintained some level of investment in an entrepreneurial venture. You can't take that satisfaction of knowing you've built something from the ground up away.
Okay.
It's just using it within the proper context of a plan. So that's what we do. But the business owner is always at the head of the table.
So what if the former business owner or soon to be former business owner says, hey, look, I'd like some help manage my money, but I already know I want to take 40% of the sale proceeds and start this other business or invest with my buddy in this other business, and no ifs, ands, or buts, that's what I'm doing with 40% of the money. What's the wealth manager's appropriate response to that?
That's a great question. So we are not the ones to dictate to the business owner what they should be doing with their money.
Okay.
It's not up to us, it's up to them. And so if that's what the plans and the objectives are, and we've modeled out what they want to accomplish as a result of that, that's fine. In fact, I have found that most business owners and most entrepreneurs, particularly serial entrepreneurs, is they always want to keep a portion of their money in some sort of private investment or enterprise. Particularly nowadays, we're seeing lots and lots of them, especially here in our Tampa Bay area with all the growth that's going on. And how can I participate in that success? I think what the difference is that we want to make sure that we put this within the proper context of the investment policy statement. We have some business owners that have a tendency to get too excited and they start chasing too many deals. And they go from creating this very complex structure to an even more complex with all these different things. And so what we like to do is have conversations around budgets. Do you have a designated amount of money that you wish to invest in private placements or other enterprises outside of the work we're doing for you? That's fine. Let's put it within the context of your investment plan.
Not an all or nothing.
That's exactly right.
So wealth managers just say, give me all of your money or nothing. They should accommodate.
Not. Absolutely not.
All right. So you've been jumping around on my questions here. So why does a successful business owner knock on your door? We've kind of said why they should, but what's the kind of number one or top two reasons why you see someone showing up? What is it that they need that you can give them, or a good wealth manager can give them that they know they need?
It's a great question. So I would say the first one is post-transaction. That's the business owner, entrepreneur who did not do the planning, maybe had it within their minds that once I exit successfully, that this is going to bring about all these wonderful things that I've been dreaming about for years, only to find 2 to 3 months after the transaction, they haven't done anything. And the satisfaction of the sale is gone. And when I've dove deeper into helping to really understand the psychology or the mindset of the business owner, it keeps coming back to planning and expectations. I thought my life would be different after I transitioned my business, and it's the same. I'm still questioning, what do I need to do? The money's sitting in the bank, earning a very low rate of interest in a savings account. I don't know what this next chapter is going to look like. So then as an advisor, I then have to go back to the why. And that's the biggest one, is the why. Why are we doing this in the first place? Are there health concerns and I'm getting out of the business because I want to enjoy my life? Is it a retirement? Is it something that I want to begin the next chapter? Is it to build something new? I have a very good friend of mine who's an entrepreneur, and he's a builder. He doesn't like businesses that get up and running. He doesn't like to deal with HR and people coming to him saying, I need you to create this report. It drives him crazy. He's a builder. And so when he transitioned his business, what he finds most satisfying, because we helped prior to the transaction, is helping young entrepreneurs either through a mentorship program, or being involved in the community, the real ecosystem of entrepreneurs. It's given him the satisfaction and the energy and the passion for business that he lost once the business was up and running.
Yeah.
And so that's different for everybody. So that's the first thing is I haven't done the planning beforehand. You're going to hear this from me a lot, proper planning, and it begins early and often before the transaction. So that's the first thing. I sold the business. I thought things would be different, and it's all the same, and I'm not happy. The other part about it is who comes knocking on the door is they're with an advisor who does not have the capability or the expertise and experience to work with a family of this level of wealth. I see this a lot where different advisors aren't equipped, maybe their platform doesn't support it, and they try to make it work, and it just doesn't work. And it has nothing to do with performance, it has nothing to do with different products and solutions, but it has to do with expertise and experience of knowing how to work with a high net worth and an ultra high net worth family. It's not the same if you're getting a retail experience and you all of a sudden have a very high level of wealth. You need someone who understands you, because life does not necessarily need to get more complicated, but you have to be around people who understand you, understand how taxes work, understand how estate planning works, and how creating multi-generational wealth, if that's your objective, works. Creating charitable ventures, how does that work?
Yeah, that's very different than just getting a couple of points higher return for the same amount of risk, which I know is kind of a typical kind of investment advisor.
Sure.
That's some of them. That's kind of the largest thing that they think about. The hardest
Absolutely.
problem that they have to solve is just that, and they stay focused on that. I think also one thing that's that you touched on is that I think a lot of business owners and people like me that aren't yet, hopefully yet, ultra high net worth individuals. We know what's available to us. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, REITs.
Yep.
Like I think I'm pretty savvy on that kind of stuff. But my understanding is once you get into that, whatever that club is of high net worth, and you work with the wealth manager, the right type of wealth manager, there are other types of investments that most people don't know about because they don't pay attention, or if they knew about them, they wouldn't have access to them. Am I right about that?
Yeah, it is true. And I would say that our industry is doing a much better job of providing solutions, investment solutions to a wide spectrum of investors. So it's not necessarily that the air is thinner up here and you've got something that other folks can't get access to. I think our industry, again, has done a very good job of providing investment solutions for folks who choose to do it on their own. But I think what the bigger difference is, and this is where human behavior comes into play, is do you have the emotional capacity to be able to manage this wealth in a sense that you have a designated and written plan, and you have defined and objectified what level of risk you're willing to take. And I find that to be very difficult for a lot of investors, and particularly around managing expectations, because markets don't operate in a linear fashion, A to B in a straight line, much like business owners don't. They go through economic cycles. They have setbacks. They have an order that gets messed up, and all of a sudden it completely fouls up their financials for the year. There could be external influences, whether it would be currency trades, whether it be the cost of trade, of goods and services and labor, all of these things weigh down on the business. When it comes to investing, you have to really set that part aside. And that's very difficult for us to do as human beings because we don't like to lose money.
Yeah.
Right? And so how do we separate the emotional attachment of investing, which is in a volatile market, it's going to move around, with I have a plan in place to get to here, I'm building from here, and I have the patience and the right plan in place, and I have the right provider that's going to help me get there.
It's interesting. I wonder if former business owners are better or worse than the general public at dealing with those market shifts that nobody could really control. They're not really going to derail them, but they look like a bump in the road. And if you get your eyes out of focus, they can look like a big deal, and they're not necessarily.
So we look across the broad spectrum of transactions that have occurred in the last several years in the private markets. We specialize in the public markets, but we do have access to resources and data within the private markets. And multiples, generally speaking, over the last several years have been on the incline. And you've seen that for business owners. So they're getting an all-time high in some industries, multiple for their transaction. They're putting money to work at what most folks believe is an all-time high in the public markets. So how do I provide protection? And I know we're going to go there in a moment. How can we make our money work for us so that we can help provide a buffer or some sort of reassurance to knowing that that money's going to be there and continue to grow? That has been, in the last couple of years, with the business owners that I've had the honor to serve and have become clients of our firm, is it takes a lot of education, because there's a lot of things that go on in the markets that we in the industry understand to be normal. But what we have to challenge ourselves to do is to put ourselves in their shoes.
Okay.
What does it feel like to see these movements? How comfortable are they with different risk asset classes? And we do that work beforehand. You know, the last thing we want to do is create a strategy for someone, execute on it, and have them come back and say, well, this wasn't what I expected.
Yeah.
And that's where the planning and using different tools and the cash flow analysis and pro formas that we do and have access to some pretty sophisticated things that simplify the idea of investing. Why are we doing this anyway? So all-time high in multiples, business owners are relatively happy selling their business. Expectations are higher, right?
Yeah.
And then what do we do with the proceeds after they're done? Anchoring back to planning. If we've done the planning ahead of time, that conversation is a lot easier versus I'm 30, 60 days out from a sale. I don't know what to do with this. Is this enough?
Yeah, especially because if you're 30 to 60 days out from a sale, you're going to be really busy.
Yes.
You're trying to keep hitting your numbers right up until the closing. You're making sure the net working capital is where it needs to be, and you're engaged in the sale process, and you're dealing with all the family emotional issues associated with that change. So trying to add into that 30 to 60 days before close, hey, let's start a big conversation about the rest of my life. It's probably not the right. That's probably the very challenging time to do that. I think. So when we talk to prospective clients, business owners, and some of them tell us like, I can't sell now because I'm 50 or I'm 55. And I'm going to live too long. I'm in good health, actuarial data. I can't possibly sell the business now for enough. I'm going to sell when I'm 65 or 60 or something like that. Yeah. And my first question is always, so great. So you've got a wealth manager that's helped you model that out. And then the answer is always, no. It's just simple math.
Yeah.
What should I say to that business owner to get them to? I mean, they may still be correct, right? Not everyone can sell a business at the age of 50 and retire off the proceeds. But how can they make the most informed decision in that scenario?
That's an excellent question, and I think in terms of transition planning, you and I have talked about this, Clinton. That exit planning feels so final. It feels like I'm exiting, I'm leaving the room, and the doors are shut, and I'm never to come back. And that's just not the case. We talk about transition because it's not a zero-sum game. A lot of business owners need to think in terms of, is it wise to potentially bring an equity partner in who can help me get to the next level? Or is it wise to take some chips off the table for myself, for my own financial security? I'm 50. I don't know if I want to retire. Look, we're all living longer. And the reality of it is that the entrepreneur is going to find another entrepreneurial enterprise to invest in. So it has more to do with, so what do you want to create as a result of this transition? Is the business plateauing and your job is to get it to the next level in the next 5 years? Do I need to bring in a consultant? Do I need to bring in other key members of my team to help right the ship a little bit? That gets back into the work that we do in the modeling and the cash flow. So we can help a business owner that's thinking about taking a partial exit, maybe a full exit with earnouts and other things that maybe the buyer wants to offer to them, and we can model that to see what that potentially could look like. So I would say to you, when a business owner says, well, I'm 50, I don't want to retire, say, great. Well, what do you want to do? And have you quantified, do you have the right team of advisors around you who have provided you with the information and insight into determine if you can make this work for you and your family or not? It's pure and simple. And particularly around family businesses, you have to you have many different voices at the table. That can be even more challenging.
Every business is a family business. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So there can be some real challenges around communicating that, but it comes back to working with a team that has the experience and has the ability to help them work through those different issues. It's not always about a number.
It's interesting you mentioned taking some chips off the table. So in my role now that I'm not directly involved in deals anymore, I'm still seeing kind of 30 to 50 deals a year.
Yeah.
And what we've seen over the last 3 years is astronomical growth in kind of an 80-20 deal, where the business owner sells 80% and then rolls over 20% of the business and stays on for the cliche is the second bite of the apple.
Yep.
And oftentimes, particularly if it's private equity involved, they're looking for a 4 times cash on cash return. So they're going to sell 80% of the business now for say 80, and then 5-7 years from now, they're going to sell that last 20% for 80 again, because they're going to quadruple the money. So how can a wealth manager work with that? Is that
absolutely
how does a wealth manager work with it then?
Sure. I think a quick story is relevant here. A family that sold their business last year came to us in about 2 years before the exit, so we had the opportunity to engage around some planning. But one of the things that happened is from the beginning of our conversation to pretty much a month or so before the transition, the negotiating was all over the place. The business owner comes to the table and says, I want all cash at close, right? That's it. I want maximum value, cash at close, no earnout, I'm out the door. Well, the reality is not a lot of deals that are getting maximum value have that feature. Unless you have a business that the buyer is just salivating over and they say, we'll give you whatever you want. In most instances and experiences, and I know you've had some experience with this too, it involves different negotiating tactics, right? How do we get to that number? Is it all cash at close? Is it an earnout? Is it gross profit? Whatever the case may be. And we have the ability to model that and build it in there, but also provide the reality of what happens if that doesn't happen, right? So we have this enterprise value we're trying to get to, but what happens if the transitioning leadership team or the new company that comes in doesn't or is unable to hit those numbers? What does that look like? So we really kind of look at it from a couple different scenarios. One, what if you hit your numbers and you hit all the bogeys and voila? What if you don't? And I think that's the biggest missing variable is that a lot of business owners think that those gross profit numbers or whatever the multiple in year 2 or year 3 is going to be hit with no problem, right? Because they know their business. I know my clients. We're going to hit these numbers.
Yeah, and we always encourage them to only agree to those numbers if they believe that they're real numbers. Yep.
And I spend a great deal of time in my practice helping with these business owners is to say, that's great. What happens if we don't? Let's just say, for example, it's a low probability, but what happens if it doesn't work out?
Oh, that's great. Because I tell you, when we work with clients on this, we encourage them when we're helping to structure the deal to have realistic earnouts or expectations on the rollover, et cetera.
Yep.
And they agree they're realistic. And then a couple weeks later, they say, well, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And then the doubt starts to set in, and I see them having a hard time, getting through that. So having another person to talk to about it and say, like, okay, if it's off the mark and if it doesn't work out, let's look kind of scientifically at the consequence. That's great. So sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead.
No, that's it. But that's key, because what I have found in a number of instances is that the expectation is that is the reality. And because they haven't exited, most business owners haven't gone through an exit before. They don't know what it's like. They sort of get happy ears when they hear a number. And so what we want to do is really make it real to them and say, what if this doesn't work out? Are you going to be okay? Sometimes it means reducing your expectations. Maybe I thought I needed to live off of X, but in reality, I need to do Y. On average, it takes myself and our team 3 to 6 months to figure out that number, because a lot of times business owners have based their personal budgets off of the cash flow that's generated from the business. So you take the business out of the equation, you replace it with a pile of cash. How do you put a spigot in it and turn it on so that you can live off of that? And we do a great deal of work on the front end. In fact, I'll tell you that this very same client I mentioned earlier It took 6 months for him and his family to get to that number. And we must have worked through 15 different iterations of how we can come up with the type of lifestyle income that they need. And every time they would negotiate with the buyer, we'd go back in and change the variables and say, hey, does this work? Can we make this happen? And also, it's also looking at what type of lifestyle expenses are being funded by the business.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
The tickets,
the country
phones,
clubs,
the
whole 9
yeah.
yards.
Yeah.
The buyer is not going to assume those liabilities. So let's strip those out, put that into your personal cash flow. And then it makes it real. Do you really need those sport tickets? Do you really need this stuff now that it's on your dime?
Yeah.
And some business owners say, yes, it's something I like to do. It's a part of who I am and my family. This is our opportunity to spend time together. And others go, not really. And so what does a real budget look like? That takes time. That takes a lot of time.
So a lot of I see a lot of clients, again, you alluded to this, focused on, I want all my money on day one. And so and this kind of points out the value of having the whole team of a broker, a wealth manager, good M&A attorney,
yep.
good M&A tax advice from your accountant or your tax lawyer, because we have to approach the risk associated with those deferred payments,
yeah.
Whether it be an escrow or an earnout or a seller note, or even the rollover that we mentioned earlier. And so there's different ways that all those different team members can help them deal with that risk, right? So there's tax risk that the tax advisor helps with. There's the legal risk, is the buyer going to default on the payment? If so, what are my consequences? That's why you need the good lawyer in there to help with that.
That's exactly
and,
right.
And the broker's there to help you get what you want to get out of it and maximize it, and also help with some of the financial risk aspects of it. And then the wealth manager is there, as you mentioned earlier, to say, what is the actual risk to your future if these other team members have done their best, but something happens and you don't get what you expect from it.
Yeah.
So I think someone that has that whole team in place and solid team members, my view on it is, what's the difference between getting all the money at close versus getting, some of it, most of it now, a little bit, and maybe 18 months later in an escrow, and then maybe a little bit later, 2 years, 3 years in a seller note. Sometimes with the SBA, we see 5-year Small Business Administration loans. We see a 5-year seller note.
Yep.
So assuming that we and the lawyers and the accountants have done our job to build as strong a barrier as possible around the deal and the documents,
yep.
What is is there a real drawback to someone getting their money a little bit later as opposed to getting it all at once? Or do you want all the money at once because then you're going to be able to make more money off it? What's the view on the kind of deferment? Again, assuming that we've taken the deal risk out of it, just talking about from a wealth management point of view, the timing aspects of getting some of the money now and some of the money later.
And that's where we're really agnostic. So we don't have a preference one way or the other when it comes to working with business owners. So we're not the ones to sort of dictate, here's how you need to do this. We really want the business owner and their team to help kind of provide that. So what we're going to do is we're going to model that and see what it looks like. So in my example of a family that joined our firm earlier in the year, it was a setup very similar to that. And what really drove the decision around that type of deal structure was his comfortability around what direction the business was heading in. Obviously, business owners are feeling very excited about their business. They love their clients. We're growing at 20, 30% clip a year, and we're just going to keep on going. Except there was 1 month where they took the eye off the ball. And that 1 month railroaded the opportunity for this family to maximize their earnout. How did that affect their overall planning? Well, the work we did ahead of time said no earnout. Can we still survive as a result? And it gave this family the insight and clarity to be able to say, they weren't as cavalier about, we're not going to hit our earnout, no big deal, trust me. They want to get that earnout back into place. But at least gave them the comfort and the freedom to say, gosh, I don't need this to make it work. And we had agreed ahead of time on what this was going to look like. And are you comfortable with the fact that this doesn't work out? I'm finding more and more buyers, and I know you're seeing this too, Clinton, is that earnout is becoming much more a part of the transaction because maybe there's something in the financial past that they want to make sure doesn't rear its ugly head again, or they want to make sure that this client that they just brought on is truly going to drive earnings the way that we have estimated it to look like. So it's really kind of also risk, it's protection for the buyer, but the seller, let's model it out. Let's see what it looks like. And let's work hard to make sure that whatever retained control you have, that you can hit that number and work hard to get there.
Okay. So I think that kind of the one kind of big question I have to wrap this up before we do a little summary is, what are the kind of 3 or 4 most important things that a business owner should be thinking about in the early stages about their life after they sell?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things I've attached to the webinar are some PDFs that talk a little bit about that, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we just launched a brand new website specifically and dedicated to business owners. If you go to bnymellonwealth.com/business-owner, you will find an array of resources and tools, regardless of the size of the business or where you are in your journey, whether you're just starting out or you're kind of at a mid-cycle or you're getting ready to exit. Ton of resources around things that we have found through our experience of working with business owners on those different levels, those different stages of growth, if you will, that have really resonated with them. So whether it would be just simple things like making sure your personal financial house is in order, to things like, should I create a board of directors? Does that make sense for my business to do that? And what is the benefit to having audited financials? Is it really that important to the marketplace? And one of the things that I'm seeing more and more of in due diligence, and what a lot of business owners have not necessarily put a lot of weight into, is cybersecurity. It's a huge issue. We tend to think of cybersecurity as a problem for the government and large companies because they're the ones who get the high profile attacks. Well, guess what? The mid and small level businesses are very vulnerable to these types of things. So we're really educating the business owner on the importance of having a designated cyber plan, having a transition plan in place, getting the necessary documents up front so that all you're doing is, as the business grows, all you're doing is just refining and changing you're dotting a few I's and crossing a few T's and maybe adding a line or two. But it's the work that goes in on the front end to be able to help you get to the direction in which you're wanting to go to. Most business owners that I talk to now that tell me they're within a 5 or a 10-year cycle of exit will more than likely achieve those goals before that time period.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's thinking about that discussion now versus later. Don't think of 10 years as being some point in the future. What do I need to be thinking about now? And that website is chock full of information about things that business owners and family members of business owners should really be thinking about, real thought stimulators.
Okay. Great. So to summarize, the things that I've picked up from Wealth Manager are, it's rarely too early if you're a business owner to start. You should expect to be able to deal with the right type of wealth manager for a pretty extended period of time without any obligation for payments. And that's the way the model works. It's not an imposition on the wealth manager. It's how that industry works, it appears. 3, planning is probably more important than the actual asset management piece of it, though of course any wealth manager, you'd want to make sure they have the chops to do the asset management correctly.
Absolutely.
And the asset allocation correctly, but don't overlook the planning part, which is something that probably, if you have been a business owner for a while and you do invest in the markets and you have a investment advisor, they may or may not have been doing the planning, and if they have been doing the planning, it might be of kind of this scale of planning, and you need that scale of planning. So pick a wealth manager that is properly attuned to the type of investment portfolio or the magnitude of your investment portfolio you're going to have. Maybe also pick someone who's got experience dealing with business issues, because a lot of what you said is stuff that I guess I knew from my experience from the brokerage side, which is that business owners are a little bit different than everybody else. They're very successful people. They've largely been right on most of the important decisions in their life, and they're going through a very important transition. That, as we always say at Benchmark International, it's not only a financial transaction or transition, but it's also an emotional transition. So you always want to have your advisors around that are attuned to that and can make sure that they can can keep things moving ahead and address those concerns that you have as well. I think also some of the other key points that you mentioned would be that it's not an exit, it's a transition. That you're not giving up control when you sell the business and enter the world of post-business life. I really liked what you said, that your life after the transaction can be very similar to your life before, but instead of managing a bunch of machinery or engineers or whatever, you're now managing something different. But you can still be the CEO of the family office.
Absolutely.
You still call the shots. If you want to use a wealth manager for some of the funds of the sale and not some of the funds, that should be acceptable to the wealth manager. I think any other key points I left out there?
I would also underscore tax efficiency, Clinton.
I
think that's one that we sort of overlook. We tend to look at the bottom line number, what types of investment returns can I get? But particularly with our high net worth and ultra high net worth families, is taxes are a real issue. I mean, they could potentially bleed a third of your wealth every single year. And so finding an advisor or a team that specializes in tax efficient investing, that's a big component. Being able to customize for the family. So I'll give you another quick example. A family that sold their business earlier this year, staring down the barrel of a very significant tax bill. And they understand that. They look, everybody pays taxes and I'm happy to pay my share. But how can we be efficient with the strategies that we're executing on to minimize that on a go-forward basis so that we can keep more for our family versus handing off more to the government? And that's a big part of what we do. Tax efficiency is huge. And it's something that is often overlooked in the world of investing because we tend to bottom line it. Wow, I got X% last year, but how much did you give to the government? What is your real return? And working with a fiduciary, BNY Mellon Wealth Management, we operate as a fiduciary. We are not a broker dealer.
Why don't you go ahead and explain the meaning of that?
Yeah, so a fiduciary has a legal obligation to put your interests first.
Okay.
Pure and simple.
That's a good explanation.
We are not suitable. So in other words, we don't recommend products based on suitability. We recommend solutions based upon goals and objectives. We have a written investment policy statement every family gets. We're transparent across the board with all the work that we do. So we're not trying to in any way provide a conflict. So we are working extremely hard to help our families in that regard.
Great. So we here at Benchmark International, we love having clients that have already engaged a wealth manager. Nothing's better than going into a first meeting and actually having the wealth manager come to the meeting. Maybe not the first meeting, they come to like the second meetings, but we love that. It's great. We love it even better if they have BNY Mellon Wealth Management. I'm sure most of the audience knows the name. They've been, they've been around in slightly different names for generations. They're all over the country.
Globally.
Chris is globally. Sorry, forgot we have an international audience. Yep. So Chris, you handle Florida.
I do.
You personally are all over Florida. So you're in Florida, Chris. If you're not in Florida, Chris, still your guy. Call Chris. There are BNY Wealth Management specialists, and I know many of them, largely through their association with the AMA organization. And a lot of our clients have worked with a lot of others in Florida. They've always worked with Chris and had great results and sung his praises. So highly encourage you, even if you're not yet thinking about leaving the business, reach out to Chris. His contact information is on the little click to the left, but just in case, phone number that people should call you at?
Absolutely. So my email address is in there. I won't read that off as it's lengthy, but the phone number of the office is 813-405-1223, and that rings right to my office.
Great. So we have a little time for questions. So Kyle, what's our first question?
All right. So the first question we had here was from a gentleman named Jeff. He was interested in finding out a little bit more information about how do wealth managers make their money.
Okay, so the new microphone is all the way over here, and Kyle's all the way over there, so I'll repeat that. The question is, so we talked about wealth managers not charging for that consultation early on,
right?
But obviously, probably an obvious question, how do wealth managers make their money?
Absolutely. So if I have done my job correctly and added value throughout this process, and I've earned the right to manage the wealth, then it becomes a percentage of assets under management. And every firm charges something a little bit different, but it comes down to a percentage of what those assets are. We don't get into the specifics of commissions and things like that. We charge assets under management. So if I've earned the right and our team has done a job that is satisfactory to the family and they're going to entrust us with that family wealth, then it's a percentage of assets under management.
Yeah, so I'm always worried about scamsters and things in the market. So
Right.
if a business owner is asked to pay a wealth manager something before they have any assets under management, is that the way some people do it, or is that
They
a
do.
red flag? So
No.
some people do that. It's a legitimate practice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say that in our industry, the average is a percentage of assets under management. There are firms and boutiques out there that may be charged by the hour or charge an engagement fee to do the work, maybe on the planning side. You know, my advice to all the folks out there who are interested in learning more is to ask questions. You know, the Wall Street Journal put out a very insightful article, I think it was in 2007, that said it's either 7 or 9 questions that everybody should ask their financial advisor when you're interviewing somebody. And that should be a question. How are you paid?
Yeah.
Because if the answer is free, there's something else to it than that.
Nobody works for free.
There's no free lunches on Wall Street. So if somebody is offering you a free solution to manage your wealth, you have to ask the follow-up question as well, how are you really getting paid?
Okay. All right. What else do we have, Kyle?
So we have another one that came in that they were interested in if they talk to a wealth manager and they don't invest any money with them. So what's kind of the process with that?
Oh, so I kind of asked, but you kind of addressed that in the last question. But the question is, if someone does talk to a wealth manager and then doesn't invest, what happens? So I guess we kind of discovered the financial, we kind of covered the financial aspects of that, but you know, are your feelings hurt, or is it just the cost of doing business?
It's the cost of doing business. It's like anything else. If you go to interview someone and you like what they say, but you're just not ready to hire them, that's part of business. Okay. So I would say it's just, I've been doing this for 20 years and it's part of doing business. If you find that there is someone that you connect with and you have a good relationship with that understands you and understands your family, that's what's most important. Really, the name on the business card is important because you really want to know what kind of safety and security and soundness is the real entity. But at the end of the day is, do they understand me? And do I have a confidence that they're going to be able to help me achieve my objectives?
Okay. What else we got, Kyle?
And then we had another question that came in throughout this webinar. You guys mentioned seller notes and rollover. What exactly do those two terms mean?
Okay, so let me start out. The question is, we mentioned seller notes and rollovers to us several times, and so what do those mean? So a seller note, so buyers coming into a transaction rarely use all cash or all equity. They go and they borrow money to finance the transaction. And so the first slab of money they will usually borrow, they'll go to a bank or some form of a commercial lending institution, and they'll borrow as much as 40% of the purchase price. That's 40% is almost an average number nowadays because debt's been so cheap. It'll probably shrink as the interest rates continue to escalate, but it's always going to be a substantial slab of the investment. And so sometimes the banks have tighter standards, particularly with today's high multiples. So in order to make the purchase price that was agreed in the letter of intent work, there has to be a certain size slab of debt on there. So sometimes the buyer will go to the banks and their normal lenders and they'll say, well, we're not going to give you 40% of that price. That multiple's too high. We'll give you 30% of that price. So then there's a 10% hole that the buyer has to fill. Some buyers know ahead of time they're going to have that, so they'll put it into the letter of intent. Sometimes it comes up later. And so what they'll do then is they'll look for another creditor to give that last 10%, and they'll go to the seller and say, hey, can I pay you 10% on a promissory note a little bit later? And then that gets negotiated in the deal, and there's interest on the note, and the lawyer gets in there and builds a good solid note, and that's the seller note. So that's what the seller note is. It's the seller's partial financing of the transaction. The result to the seller is they're going to get some of their money later. But they're going to get interest on it, and of course there's the risk that has to be addressed anytime you lend someone money. So that's the seller note. And the other question was rollover. So rollover is I mentioned this a little bit, but I'll go explain a little bit better. So if you don't sell 100% of the business, you sell say 80% of the business, which is the most common percentage we see. But it could be you could sell 70%, you could sell 50%, you could sell 40%, 90%, whatever. That part that you don't sell is it's just kind of an industry term, that's the rollover. You could also call it the retained portion of the business. So you are not only going to have all those documents related to a sale of the business, but you're going to have a whole other set of documents related to your new partnership. And a stockholders agreement or an operating agreement, because you're going to stay on as a owner. We most often see our clients staying on as minority owners, so they need those shareholder agreements to get some good minority protections in there to make sure that the value of that 20% is 1/4 of the value of the 80%. And that's a big thing that we always push with our clients, because a lot of times buyers will say, well, you roll over and we're going to take preferred stock and you're going to have common stock. And we say, whoa, what does that mean? And the buyers sometimes will say, well, that means we're going to get an 8% preferred dividend. Like, wait a minute, I didn't get 20% of the business. I got 12% of the business. You're calling it 20, but it's not. So Benchmark International gets in there and fights to say, we make it very clear from the beginning, if our client's rolling over, retaining any equity, it's going to be pari passu. It's going to have the same rights as yours. And sometimes there's some buyers put in a little bit of a fight, but financially we want that to be on par, because we don't want clients to think they own 20% and then find out financially afterwards, I'm only getting 12% of the returns for some reason. So that's something we do to help with that wealth management. If they got 20% and they're coming from Benchmark, it should be an honest 20%, not something that's called 20%. It's something else. So I don't know, any wealth management points to add to that?
I just underscore being around folks that have experience and have a lot of knowledge about that, because as you say, there could be language in the note that potentially could come back to bite them, or could be not what they understand it to be. And a lot of business owners rely upon good counsel and good advice, and they need to make sure that they're with an experienced team of advisors who can pick up on those things and say, hey, we recognize this in the documents, let us go back and adjust it, or hey, this isn't in your best interest, let us work with you to resolve that. And again, seller's notes and rollovers could mean a very significant second bite of the apple, as you say, and we can model those out as well.
Great. All right, so we're just a couple minutes over time here. Thank you everyone for joining. Don't forget there'll be a survey at the end. If there's any improvements, please do get those in there. It helped me afford this new microphone and get that approved. So let's always try to make this better, more informative. I'd also like to hear what topics you would like to hear about in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.